I was going to say, actually, Vincent, it sounds like this area might be something we could kind of add to the roadmap, is kind of adding kind of more best practice tips and kind of, we started this a little bit, but it sounds like there's a lot of details someone should know when they first start the software.
Yeah, we definitely need to publish a bit more about results, and all the work that I did on the WMT English to German task. I really think that we need to diversify a little bit more and to publish some results, some like good results. Because as an example, I saw a poster from another toolkit here, and again showing some poor results of OpenNMT, but very good results on NeuroMonkey. As you saw in my presentation, NeuroMonkey was very poor results on the Sakai paper. So all of this is very difficult to maintain and together.
But I think I'm less interested in the kind of competitive aspect and more in just like, if you're a company starting, here are maybe some configs
exactly,
you might
to
try.
give some settings, some initial settings, and not just the default basic settings of the toolkit.
Yeah.
Something that maybe we have not seen on OpenNMT is the recipes. So Vincent tried to launch some recipes when we started OpenNMT. Didn't really work, but it's something we will try to put emphasis a bit more. With the NMT wizard, it will be very simple to give a recipe. A recipe will just be a config file, and the NMT wizard will take over on that.
And as a researcher, this is a very interesting one. I think it's an area we've been really focusing on, the kind of main language families, but kind of integrating in diverse language needs and being able to work with low resource languages and build that into neural machine translation is a kind of hot area of research right now. We're starting to see some really interesting work on dealing with, say, if you only have 50,000 sentence pairs, how do you build good models? And we don't have that yet in any kind of toolkit, but we should build those ideas in. Oh, yeah. Sorry, let me run over to you. What was the question? I think so people can hear there as well.
I was asking that question about the NGO and the diverse languages, and you mentioned that possibly a model would be available. Do you have any idea when this model could be available?
Yeah, I don't have anything particular yet, but it's just an area that I know that there are a lot of researchers interested in, and it's an area that people have been working on heavily.
My question is again about low resource languages, and not only low resource languages, it's more about morphologically rich languages. A language like Arabic, on which I work a lot, and Arabic and its dialects are, kind of some research focus these days, and I would like to know, how do you deal with that within a search system? I mean, how can you kind of force, these morphology within a neural system that is basically just based on neurons? And the other question I have is about evaluation, actually. How do you evaluate a system that translates into this kind of languages, beyond going through, BLEU with the strict matching and seeing how a model would do?
So you're asking all the questions that I love to do research on. So we've published some papers on how you deal with morphology in translation. Those methods are somewhat useful. We use a kind of character level features in addition to word features. And Vincent also mentioned BPE is a very common method to break up words into pieces. Another technique that I think you guys use in practice is to have morphological features with each word. So you can actually inject morphological features into the words itself. That's supported in all 3 OpenNMT versions. You can kind of have extra features with each word. And there was a second part about evaluation.
That was about evaluation, yeah.
Is there anything different in evaluating? No?
We don't work with low resource languages, so it's very difficult for us to comment on this.
Okay.
Just one thing on low resource languages. I think there have been some experiments, and there is actually one recipe on the OpenNMT website regarding multi-languages models. Okay, we did a training from about 5 different languages to 5 other languages. So it shows that it can train some additional features and enrich the target from one language pair to the other language pair, depending on which language you take. So
I should say though, it's still a kind of open question. I don't want to promise that you can just magically deal with low risk. It's a very hard problem. Yeah.
Just adding a comment on that, there will be a presentation this afternoon by Guillaume Lample on Facebook about unsupervised NMT, which is probably a good direction for this type of question. And tomorrow, Guillaume Klein will be proposing in the Hackathon Day implementation of the paper unsupervised NMT. So this, but as Sasha said, it's directions more than solution. I just want to add a thing on the low resource because it rings me a bell about people are asking on the forum, is there this and this model available? So it's a bit hard for us to do that because we are in a busy world. But I encourage anyone in the community who have a good model on something and they want to share, please contact us. We'll find a way to make model available for the community because I think it's a good way to, we are spending a lot of time on the GPU, on research, on cleaning data. At the end, it's good that we have something that can be used by other people and that they don't need to go through the same ordeal when they are doing this, their model. So please share if you have models.
Actually, I had two quite different questions. The first one is directed more to Jean, maybe. I think at one point on one slide I saw that you mentioned some dictionary. Do you use some bilingual dictionaries and do you combine them in some way with NMT models?
I didn't put that on a slide, but yes, we do. And
no, there was a slide in which there was the word dictionary mentioned.
Oh, I didn't make that on purpose.
Okay.
No, yeah, dictionary is a resource. Dictionary is actually a very good resource, and we are using dictionary in our training to improve the quality of the data because it gives you a kind of a head start on all the words that need to be learned. And sometimes there is not even one sentence with all terminology. So for us, terminology is a very good resource to put in training.
And I have a different question, the higher level question, so to speak, and maybe naive question. But it's very difficult to tune these hyperparameters, right, in these models. And so I believe also, I don't know very much. There is some, of course, quite a bit of research on hyperparameter search. Have you worked at all in that? And do you believe that there is something better than doing, naive random search of hyperparameters or grid search? Or do you believe in, more advanced techniques for that? And do you feel it is important?
I think that's an area that's highly debated at the moment. There's some very explosive blog posts, one way or the other, and kind of fights going on in the ML community about whether things like Bayesian optimization really give you huge benefits there, or whether random search is more beneficial. In our lab, we mostly just do random search or grid search for hyperparameters, but there are people who think that Bayesian optimization type methods or other types of hyperparameter are really effective.
So you are not convinced that this research topic is an important one, or what do you think?
Certainly, if you could show that it was very effective, I would think it would be a tremendously important area. I'm just not. I'm not yet convinced that I should move to using the methods yet. I haven't been convinced. The current methods, yeah. I should also say though that at least in the research environment we're in, the base LSTM models, I do not think need that much hyperparameter tuning. We basically stick with SGD and use roughly the same size models, and you get near enough to the state of the art that we're interested for those models. It's these newer models that we don't totally understand yet and are still kind of fiddling with.
Thank you.
Let me mention one other quick thing though. There's actually a nice paper by Amazon who do great work in this area, really kind of going through all the hyperparameters you would need for an NMT system. And we can post that somewhere as well. It's worth reading if you're interested in getting that right. And I also noticed there were some questions about areas like domain adaptation or out of vocabulary, why that's still hard. There's a wonderful paper by Philip Cohn where he goes through the kind of 6 current issues that are really facing neural machine translation. And like low resource, domain adaptation, out of vocabulary are all kind of areas he talks about and shows why they're hard. Yeah.
Just to jump on another subject, but I think this question is a recurring question, and I think worth we have 3 versions, and Guillaume explained why we have 3 versions and why it was important to have 3 versions, and we won't merge in one version, no way. But so it's a bit of a pain for you. We know that because investing on a new infrastructure means you need to learn the tool, and it's all a bit different. So, but we are trying to make that easier. For instance, we are trying to make, as Guillaume was saying, some component commands, the tokenizer, the handling of dictionary, the sampling of data. We try to merge all of that so that you have the same logic. The NMT wizard will help you with that too. But at the end of the day, you have to choose. Why are you using the tool? Are you using for quick experimentation, for doing crazy things, for going to production, for just having a safe baseline? So it is a question you have to ask.
And I think to defend us somewhat, I think that unfortunately the community in deep learning has kind of split along these lines as well. So it seems like a lot of research work is in kind of PyTorch style frameworks and a lot of production work is in TensorFlow. So it was a kind of not a decision we really felt like we had a choice on. We had kind of had to support both.
So related question, simplify OpenMT better support version for TensorFlow version. So yeah, the community is working on
I
that.
should say all of OpenMT I think is 3,500 lines of code, which is pretty simple. I think Moses is almost over 100,000, so we're doing our best.
Oh, sorry. I would jumping on the question.
I guess we can also ask if there's any questions in the audience. We can take live questions.
So here we have the question. So the top liked question. So we need to have this one. So it has been uprated by 10 people. So it's for you, I think, Sasha.
It's better not to have noise in your training data. If you can get perfect training data, that would be great.
No, but yeah, the point about noise and cleaning is very important for production on our side. It's the most important direction. If you want to get better results, have cleaner data. And it's good because, of course, you rely on technology, but the material you give to the technology is data. And it's normal that you need to have the best data. It's where you can make a difference. Vincent, if you want to comment on that.
Yes, we have very clean data for our in-house production. It's one specific comment on the WMT task that I presented earlier. I cleaned the data heavily, meaning that the common crowd data set that you all know is very noisy, and I reduced. I don't recall exactly the numbers, but I reduced by something like 10 or to 15% less data compared to the original data to get the achievement. So yes, it is important.
And you are ready to share your cleaning recipe, Vincent?
Of course.
Okay. One thing about all the questions, so please continue asking questions. We'll answer all the questions on the forum after the meeting, so there won't be any unanswered question. Maybe just going through them in the... This...
Yeah, I think there are a couple of big labs that are not particularly open. Unfortunately, DeepMind doesn't really release their code, and they've been doing some interesting work. It's tremendous that Google continues to release not only their models but also their code, and I think it's pretty common for all academic labs to release their code these days.
A question about the corpus again for the huge training. Yes, so there is some techniques also for corpus. There is back translation, there is data augmentation that we are doing on our side. You can, if you don't have a corpus, you can generate more corpus. So there is different way to do that. Terminology is one of them. But of course, at the end of the day, if you don't have data, you cannot train. We are really on on the technology where we train. Unsupervised NMT could be a direction, but for the moment is far beyond below the state of the art on that.
Actually, I think this is a fantastically interesting area that there seems to be a phase transition where once you get a certain amount of data, it just starts getting really good, much faster than it used to with SMT. So this is actually a really kind of fundamental question of how to train with small data. I think the Atom Optimizer, there's a very easy answer, which is that it needs to keep, I believe, 3 copies of your parameters around just to run Atom. So I think we're stuck on that at the moment, although I think there are some tricks we could add to kind of make that a little bit better.
Yeah, for Adam, typically we are using what you call Adam restart, which is on one of the options, is that we, at every, so epoch, for instance, we are restarting the parameters for Adams, which seems to improve a lot. Initially, SGD was the most successful, but with Adam restart these days, we have very good results on that.
And tensor to tensor only works with Atom. It's like required.
And as I said yesterday, there is a new ADA factor from Google Brain, which is out there now. So it's very similar to ADAM, and using the same memory as SGD. So you guys will need to implement that.
So I think we are reaching the time for this session. So what I suggest is that you continue voting on this question. We will answer to all of them.
Actually, let me answer one more really quick. This one down the bottom I think is particularly interesting. So there's been a lot of interesting work on reinforcement learning in translation. This is very hard and it changes a lot of the architecture of the systems. But this is the kind of thing that we want to work on in the PyTorch version, because it kind of supports this type of modeling change. And then if it works, kind of move it to the TensorFlow version of the system.
So there has been new question coming in the meantime. Yeah, tags and entity. So this one is a very, very interesting question, and you cannot even do that if you don't. If you want to go to production, you need to think about that. Just some hint on that. So I think that I made some post on the forum. We introduced the notion of placeholder in the tokenization, which is very important, and it's the type of thing that if you don't handle, then at the end of the day, we cannot just simply address a formatted document translation. Or so there is a lot of trick here. It's not science. It's know-how on to handle the input incoming data, which is important for business. Okay, last one. For the recording, it's better.
So you just mentioned earlier that you, well, the use of external knowledge like a dictionary, glossary, or something like that actually helps. And I was wondering whether this is the way actually you use it. So you optimize an NMT model with placeholders, and then after decoding, you fill in the right entries in the placeholders. Is it the only way? Are there other ways, or I don't know?
So this is what you are talking about is sorry, I'm going back. So what you're talking about is how to handle user dictionary in translation. Yes, it is a way. We can handle. We can put placeholder and inject them. You need to be a bit smart about that, Ford, because one user dictionary entry is not just one word. If it's a verb, if it's a noun, it doesn't behave the same way. So you need to think a bit about how to inject this placeholder with kind of semantic that is visible to the neural model. And so there is some. It's real. There we are eating the know-how more than the really techniques, because all the features are available. You need to use some features. That's one is of common input. Method that you have in OpenNMT, and then you inject more knowledge, like what is the morphology on this word, if you have it, what is the parts of speech, what Panos is doing, for instance, and then you can have some very meaningful, interesting injection of terminology inside the term. There is other techniques too. I promise on the forum that I will make a post on that. I will at some point. There is a lot of variants on this. BP is not necessary prime for that.
Okay. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Okay, since Ubicus is not the only LSP using OpenNMT, we wanted to have some other sharing their experience. What's important to notice is that just before this new product, OpenNMT Wizard, you need to have some to be at least IT savvy and to have some experience with the Linux systems and so on to train some engines. So we have two guys who will do their presentation. explaining their experience, and we will have also another presentation from a machine translation company providing machine translation as a service. So I will leave it to Panos, coming from Greece. And Cyprus, sorry.